Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Roundtree and I am the Acting Deputy Mayor this evening and I'll be chairing tonight's session. So let me start by welcoming you here tonight, and to those of you watching online, we are also live streaming this on YouTube. People watching online have been given an opportunity to ask questions if they wanted to, and they had to submit them ahead of tonight, and I don't believe that we've received any questions. So to get started, Council acknowledges and pays respect to the Ngarrindjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. We also pay respects to every Australian who has made and continues to make a positive contribution to our culture and way of life in this country we share together, Australia. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow councillor in the room, Councillor Coleman, the CEO Miles, Director of Community and Corporate Joel, our Finance Manager. Thank you, Bill. And we have apologies from Mayor Simmons and Acting Mayor Jonathan Peach, Councillor Bland, Councillor Arthur and Councillor Maiden. Toilets, if you need them, are out the door and to your right as you're walking out. So thank you. Go to the first slide. I do that. Done that one. Yeah. Okay. So there is a series of slides I'll take you through tonight, and I will provide a little bit of commentary for as well. So if along the way that you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll either get you to come to a microphone so that those online can hear, or I'll repeat the question as we get going. So this first slide is looking at the statistics around the Coorong Council. So outside of the pastoral unincorporated area, Coorong Council by land is recognised as the largest council in South Australia, covering 8,830 square kilometres. Many of the metropolitan councils would fit inside the Coorong a dozen times over. So we have 46,800 hectares of lakes, 106 kilometres of pristine coastline, of which I don't think we have hardly any ratepayers on that coastline, and 3 distinct zones, our gateway, tourism and food bowl. So these are just a few of the facts to help put the scale of our council into perspective. One of the fundamental challenges for rural councils like ours is the scale of our infrastructure compared to the size of our population. On average, it costs around $400 per kilometre to just grade and maintain our sealed roads, and that's ongoing year after year. This year, with rising costs, that number is likely to increase. To upgrade just 1 kilometre of unsealed road to a sealed road standard is around $500,000 based on recent projects that we've completed, like the Karkuma Road. So when you look at our district overall, we have roughly 1 person for every 1.5 square kilometres. It's a very small population spread across a very large area. Council maintains approximately 2,077 kilometres of roads, and if you laid that out in a straight line, you could drive from here to Sydney and almost make it back again. Of that network, around 400 kilometres are sealed and around 1,650 are unsealed. So about 80% of our road network is unsealed. I go too far. Some of the assumptions that we have made in the budget and the plan, and I'm just going to sit down. External grant funding for 26-27, we've used a conservative figure. It's unknown how we are placed in a political sense or what funding may come our way. So council needs to strike the right balance between taking advantage of opportunities, but not becoming too reliant on grants as an income source. Debt as in loans is a strategic tool to provide community assets with the assistance of grants, and borrowing for intergenerational assets and spreading that cost over the future users of the asset is also a good use of debt. So the council is proposing to increase the property rate by 6.56%, or it's about $140 for an average homeowner. The long-term financial plan guides each year's annual business plan. It looks out over 10 years and tells us what we need to be doing to remain financially sustainable. The annual business plan is where we decide what we will actually deliver in the next 12 months based on that long-term direction. Whilst we are in deficit now, if we stick to the plan, we will have a surplus in 10 years. Council will borrow money to ensure timely asset renewal when required, and that things like inflation, labour costs and the timing of income all have an effect and are not something that councils like ours can control. So Miles, did you want to just mention about the library?
Yes. So the Meningie Library is the community library is part of the high school upgrade project, and there's an arrangement where councils are required to contribute a portion of the capital costs of community libraries that are located within schools. So this particular library, there's been negotiations over the last couple of years, and it's we've landed with the government providing some support, so $200,000 towards a cost of $1.2 million. So we needed now to accommodate a $1 million expense within our long-term financial plan, and the government required that expense would be paid off over the next 3 financial years. Now, I've managed to enable the first year to be $250,000. So not a third, but a lower figure, which does help with our deficit. It keeps our deficit down a bit. It also helps with our long-term financial plan so that we can around about 4 years' time head towards surplus position. So you'll see this graph that will show the long-term financial plan, and you'll see the deficits are largely made up of this project and also the timing of grants. I might just explain the timing of grants because I think it's a really important one. The federal government provide the bulk of our grants, and they're general purpose grants for local government. Now, they normally happen around, well, they always happen at the end of the year, but they could very well either be this side of June 30. Please take a seat. They could either be this side of June 30 or they could be into July. And we have to account for them when they're received. So even though you might find, we might get paid a grant, and it looks like, because the federal budget said they're probably going to pay 80% of the grants before June 30 for councils, but that's expenditure that we're using next financial year. But we have to account for it when we receive it. So you'll see in the graph later that means our deficits tend to look odd from year to year. So again, that's why looking at over a 10-year period, it smooths out those anomalies, and you can see that we're in a nice, strong, consistent trajectory.
Thank you, Miles. So sometimes we get asked, why do we have a long-term financial plan when in any year it can change? And the answer is quite simple. By law, councils are required to plan ahead financially, not just for this year, but for the next 10 years. It is a legislative requirement, not optional, so we have to do it.
Did you think I saw one flash in front of me?
Yeah, there it is. You can see in 2023-24, rate was at 10%, and we're slowly coming down, and we're hoping to level out at around 4.73. That initial 10% was that during COVID, council made a conscious decision to keep rate increases as low as possible, below what was technically required at that time to properly maintain our assets. And I was on council at that time when those decisions were made, and they were based on the best information we had at the time and a genuine desire to support community through what was proving to be a difficult period. The reality was that this had created some catch-up pressure, and as we still need to maintain our assets and services, and those costs haven't gone away. So going forward, our aim is to bring that rate down, still maintain our assets, and hopefully level out around the 4.73 going forward. So this was what Miles was talking to you about before. It's been a little bit confusing to understand, but what it shows is that the profits, the surplus or costs or loss deficit numbers for any one financial year are very much affected by the timing of grants received by council. So the positive thing on that graph is that in 2030 or 29-30, council is aiming to have a surplus. You've already really spoken about that one, haven't you?
I have done.
Yeah.
And so, I might say as well, that is quite conservative. So, and you saw the declining rate increases. We could get to a stage, say, like where the 290,000 deficit is, and we might be able to knock off a whole lot of additional savings. And we potentially, if council wanted to go to 5%, that could possibly be a surplus year. So there are those potential opportunities. This is very conservative.
This asset renewal funding ratio chart illustrates how council has been tracking with regards to funding the renewal of assets. The council assets are the physical things council owns and must maintain or replace over time. And they're things like roads, footpaths, stormwater drains, halls, depots, toilets, playgrounds, sporting facilities, libraries, street lighting, etc. But in our case, our biggest asset by far is our road network, especially the unsealed roads. And so if you can touch it and council owns it, it's an asset and it costs money to keep going every year. So on that chart, you'll see two red lines, which is the upper target set by the Local Government Association. And that grey line in the centre is the 100% renewal mark. So during COVID, we didn't renew assets. We didn't have the money and we didn't renew them as well as what we should have. And so there was quite a dip. And then we've gradually started bringing that up. When we were funding assets under the 100% mark, we were getting a lot of complaints about our roads and some infrastructure that needed work. So we've gone back to saying, let's renew assets at 100% and factor in that cost and get those jobs done so that the ratepayers are getting what they want. SCOSA is the Essential Services Commission of South Australia. It is an independent body that oversees and reviews how councils manage their finances and how they set their rates. Councils can't choose to opt in or out of this review. It is a legislated requirement. And not only staff are required to provide the information to a SCOSA and undergo regular reviews, which is also a burden on staff time. But probably the biggest issue we've had with it is that it costs us $50,000 a year to have that review or for this review to be done. That costs the same whether you're a country council like ours or one of the Adelaide Metropolitan Councils. So their ability to pay that is much greater than ours, and it's something we've provided feedback on in the review of this process to say we think it should be more in line with a council's ability to pay. So in 2015, SCOSA assessed the Coorong Council was not financially sustainable. And since then, there has been a significant amount of work done. And in 2025, we are assessed as being mostly sustainable. And it is predicted that with a surplus forecast for 2030, that the council will end up in that nice green zone in the end and be 100% sustainable. So SCOSA identified that the main area that needed improvement, and it was no surprise to any of us, was our asset management and getting a grip really on what our understanding what assets we own, their current condition, and ensuring that we are maintaining them appropriately over time. So the annual business plan is simply the council's plan for 1 year ahead. It's what we're going to do. It outlines what things are going to cost and how we're going to pay for it. So it sets out the services we will deliver, the projects we'll undertake, the maintenance that we'll carry out, and the budget required to do that work. It's sort of what makes us accountable, and it's an opportunity for the community to see what we said we would do and then did we achieve it. It also explains why rates are set at a certain level, because it clearly shows the cost of delivering the services and maintaining assets for that year. To achieve uninterrupted services and maintain community infrastructure, it was determined that council needed to raise $21.62 million. That will come from rates and from grant funding. It's almost 50-50 in some ways, isn't it? Very close to 50-50. So this chart has been intentionally simplified into broad headings to focus on the costs in key expense areas, which is revenue, expenses, finance and depreciation, and an operating result. So behind each of those broad headings, there is a significant amount of detail. And since 2019, all elected members have worked through that detail in our finance committee meetings, which I think are open to the public and listed on the website.
Yeah.
So anyone can be a part of that if they wanted to get down into the nitty-gritty. The amount council is proposing to spend on capital items is $7.4 million, and to renew existing council assets will cost nearly $6.9 million, and to upgrade enhancement of those assets. Some of those assets is $530,000. This is a breakdown of the capital works renewal expenditure for the coming 26-27 financial year. The biggest expense is renewal of unsealed roads at nearly $3 million, followed by the renewal of seal roads at nearly $2 million. The new expenditure and capital upgrades are listed in this chart, and they total $530,000. And I'll get Mal to talk a little bit later about the strategic land acquisition, but just to explain that the SCADA upgrade in Meningie relates to our SWIM system, and that's the acronym for the Community Wastewater Management System. In simple terms, it's a system that collects and manages wastewater from homes and businesses in the township, and SCADA is the technology that allows council to monitor and control that system remotely rather than relying on manual checks, which improves reliability, faster response to issues, and reduces the risk of system failures. So I'll get Miles to talk about the strategic land acquisition.
Okay. So this time last year, we did have a similar item. It was strategic land acquisition, and it was a Culdee Road block that was purchased. And in a similar way, last year we weren't able to identify that parcel because we hadn't settled a contract with the government who was selling. And again, this year I can't quite tell you exactly where the land is because we haven't settled a contract again with the government, but I can say that in this case it's Meningie. And one of the things that happen with strategic land acquisitions is you get a rare opportunity like the Culdee Road block, which is surplus to government needs, or the government are willing to sell it, and it's one that it's appropriate for council to buy so that council can control the future use of that site. So with the Culdee Road block as an example, a smart buy, it's 2.4 hectares, if I remember correctly, on the edge of town, and we bought it for $250,000. And council will look to rezone that parcel of land so that can be used for housing. And we know in Tailem Bend there's not a lot of land for housing. So that was a really smart move. Equally, we'll be able to announce later in the year what the strategic land acquisition is, but I'm sure people, when we do, they will say, well, that's a very smart buy and council have done well. So I would not be surprised every couple of years or so we'll see something like this where council's making a really smart purchase that will end up being a really good future investment for our community.
Smiles. This chart, so how your rates are spent, this chart was put together to help explain how your rates are spent.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Can we just go back to the, did you explain the SCOTA upgrade of Meningie? Because maybe our director, because I think it's quite interesting to the community of what we anticipate to how we're going to upgrade that and then do our remaining services like that, CWMS. That's all right.
That is more than okay, Councillor Coleman. So the SCADA upgrade at the moment, yes, we're focusing on Meningie. So at the moment, we've got a fairly big risk with our CWMS systems in that there is no emergency storage at our pump stations. So essentially, the ideal setup is that you have a pump chamber and then you have an additional chamber which provides emergency storage should a pump go out. You still have the ability to, accept wastewater in a fashion until you get the pump back online. At the moment, we have, I think, out of 20 or 30 pump stations, we might have one that has an emergency chamber. That's an identified risk from ASCOSA, who govern what we do in the CWMS space. They've essentially recommended that if we are able to install a SCADA system at all our pump stations and treatment plants, they're satisfied that that mitigates the risk enough that it sort of increases our agility with managing the CWMS systems. Staff don't necessarily have to go to site anymore, and you know, quite often that could involve driving from here to Meningie or here to Tintinara to address an issue that could be done via the computer online. So that's what that system will give us the ability to do. There's still quite a few pump stations and the like across Council's district that will continue to find ways and means to expand that system into the future as we progress. So, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good pick up there, Cap. So the pie chart illustrates that for every $100 of general rates collected, about 46 goes directly into roads and transport infrastructure, which is by far our biggest cost. Around $25 goes into corporate services, which is the behind the scenes works that keeps council operating and delivering all our services. The rest is spread across services like community development, open spaces like parks and reserves, environmental services, $8, buildings and facilities, $7, planning and development, $3, and economic development, $1. So when we talk about rates, the biggest driver is always roads and everything else is sharing what's left. So during the budget workshops, elected members and key staff consider the total amount of money needed to run services, maintain roads, facilities, etc. And as we said, some of the income comes via grants, but the balance needs to be paid for by ratepayers. So we are required to increase our income in line with inflation, and the figures we're presenting do that. However, before we set rates, we are required to wait until the valuer general tells us what each property assessment number is valued at. Fortunately or unfortunately, if you're selling a property, values continue to increase across the district, which is great if you're selling. So the rate in the dollar spreads that total amount that we need across all properties based on their value. If the property price increases, then the rate in the dollar goes down, as we do not need or want to raise more money than we've budgeted for. And our aim is not to over collect, but to collect enough to deliver the services and maintain infrastructure. However, what this means from a practical point of view is that your final rates bill can still go up, even if the rate in the dollar goes down, because the lowered rate in the dollar is applied to the higher property value. For example, if your house was previously valued at $200,000, the rate in the dollar in that year was 0.23, you'd pay $460 in rates. And if your house is now valued double that at $400,000 and we reduce the rate in the dollar to something like 0.0015, you'd pay $600,000. So your rates could still go up even though the rate in the dollar goes down, and it's a bit of a balancing act. Yes.
I can elaborate on that a little bit. Last year, Valuer General, in their wisdom, when we built our house, we've been just over 2 years out of Wellington East now. We built the house for $500,000 the first year, but we rated it $600,000. Second year, the Valuer General tried to tell me our house is now worth $780,000. And I took them to task over that, and I said, no. I got the market research done through real estate agents, got them to come out and do a market report, and they said, your house is worth between $680,000 and $700,000, and I eventually got the Valuer General to reduce the rate to $700,000. But I'm very scared that they're going to try and do the same thing again this year, even though we've done nothing more to the house, because of the sole fact that we get lumped into the same area as closer to states where multi-million-dollar houses get sold, and all of a sudden they go, well, okay, the mean average for your area is $850,000, and they really don't give us an option to challenge that.
Yeah, you probably, yeah, I can understand that. I think it was good that you challenged them in the first place. That was excellent, and you got a result.
You might have to do it again.
I think I'll have to, I'm just a little bit skeptical as to whether I'll get away with it twice.
Always worth a
Yeah,
try.
I think if you use the same logic, you can't do any more than using the same logic you used in the first place. But we have seen a considerable growth sustained for the last 3 years in the Tailem Bend, Wellington East area. That's, you know, we're especially performing really well in terms of property values. But I know that sort of stings when you get your value of general assessment that then relates to your rates. But one of the key aspects here is that this council doesn't take advantage of the increase in property values. It'll lower its rate in dollars so that it's not taking advantage. Whereas quite frankly, I think in some areas of the state, potentially Metro Adelaide, some councils might have been able to take advantage of significant increases.
As residents here, we really appreciate that. Other question I do have, when I've just looked up there and see you've got residential, commercial. With an increasing number of properties out there now as Airbnbs or, one of a better word, boutique hotels, they get rated as residential or commercial. Because technically they're running a business, it really should be commercial.
They're from a
Interesting point.
land use perspective, they're residential. And that's how they're rated. Don't be surprised down the track if Airbnbs they're looked at a bit differently. But they're one of those things that's fallen through the cracks in terms of legislation. And I just think, yeah, there could very well be some changes there, especially where some councils have looked at Airbnbs, have seen them as not contributing to housing supply.
Yes.
So we've seen some councils make some rules around rating there, but as far as the category is concerned, we don't have any choice in the matter. The legislation tells us how to categorise for rating purposes. It's fair enough.
So the fixed charge component of the rate will remain the same, which is at $200. And that is only applied to one entity. So if your business has multiple assessment numbers, but under one company heading, you can apply to only have one fixed charge. Is correct, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And the rate capping is a 15 cap on application that limits how much an individual rates bill can increase in a single year if your valuation has rapidly increased. But if you did a whole lot of things to make your property more valuable and that's why it increased, it wouldn't apply. And it is on application, so you do have to apply for that.
I might just mention, look out towards the end of the year, council will commence a rating review. So the sorts of things you're talking about, John, that might be an opportunity to be part of. And the rating review takes a fair few months to go through, and it's extensive consultation. And that'll be with the new chamber after the election. It's in November. But that might be an opportunity for you to raise some of those matters, such as the Airbnbs.
So what affects the calculation of the rates? The total rate increase we are looking for is 6.56%, which is broken down into three parts. The CPI, which is a consumer price index set by the ABS, not council. Last year it was 3.2, and we're very much at that point thinking it would go down this year, but of course now it hasn't. It's gone quite a lot up. So it is much higher than we'd originally anticipated. It's not a perfect measure for council because council's costs are quite different from that of a household, which is what they base the CPI on. A lot of the expenditure of council, those costs often rise a lot faster than CPI. 1% is for growth, which is new properties that have been created and added rateable properties to council's base, ratepayer base. And the 1.36% is to help council fund the services it provides. Do you any questions on that part? Did you want to add anything?
No.
No?
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Um,
council.
I actually referring to the one before, but with the rate and the dollar, it was good that you explained and Miles did to everybody out there in computer land. about how it works and the alarm bells shouldn't be ringing so much that your value goes up, that because we'll do a readjustment in the dollar. I just probably would have thought would have been handy, and I think we did it last year. We actually had the year before's rate in the dollar alongside to comparison. I just wondered maybe later on when we put it out.
Yeah, I
We can-
believe in the final papers, we have to produce that.
Yeah.
It's actually in the,
Yeah, and that gives people some idea how it works.
yeah.
So this chart shows the average change in weekly rates for all the different rating categories. And it compares the average rates from the 25-26 financial year to the proposed rates for 26-27. And the key part to note is the last column on the right, the change in average rates per week. It's an average, so some will pay more and obviously some will pay less. So for residential properties, the average change is going to be about $2.42 a week. The first two columns next to the actual category show you that primary production makes up the largest share of the rate income at 68.63%, which has risen slightly from last year, only a very small amount, but that did rise, followed by the residentials, which is 22.49, which is up from 21.78 last year. So over the last few years, we have seen very quick and steep growth in the value of primary production land. And what we're seeing now is that has slowed somewhat and that residential values have gone up. Any questions on that slide? Right. This is a simple comparison of two properties, one being a residential one and the other being primary production, to show how rates are calculated in practice over 7 years. So if we look at the residential example, for instance, in 2021, a property valued at 127,000 had a general rate of 496, and that same property is now valued at around 335,000 and the general rate has increased to $882. So that property has increased by 164% and rates have increased by 77.8%. So while the rate has increased, the property value has more than doubled. And that's where is it? Sometimes works, some doesn't. So now going forward, we'll look at the other charges. Okay. Wellington East, as probably everyone here knows where Wellington East is, it's been established community for over 100 years, was an important crossing point of the overland route between Adelaide and Victoria during the gold rush period in the 1800s. The Wellington East Water Project was about connecting the residents of Wellington East that are currently accessing council's non-drinking or non-potable water to the SA water line that comes down from Meningie, correct? I think we've got the pipe work in, all connected, and we're just flushing it out.
Very close, as John was saying, meters.
Meters are installed.
being installed.
Installed, okay. So there was a lot of community consultation around this issue. Feedback was considered, and residents have the opportunity to pay either a total in one lump sum or they can elect to pay it off in quarterly instalments over years with a small administrative fee. Is there anything more you'd like to add to
Are
that?
there any questions on that? Anyone? No?
No, not unless, because that was only a maximum payment that we were going to make.
Yeah.
We haven't found out, or not yet, as to whether it came in on budget or under budget.
Yeah, Joel will explain.
Yeah, thanks. We're still to realise the final number. They're obviously still working. We'll probably get our final invoicing towards the end of June, and that'll be the point at which we know. We don't anticipate if there is a saving, we'll navigate that, what that means for everyone that's prepaid. And then for those that are electing to pay over, 3 years, it might mean that their third year reduces by the amount so that we don't charge more than we need to.
I think there's another interesting statistic as well. Joel, cost if we didn't have the grants. So what it would cost if each user had to pay the full SA Water cost, and it's around about $11,000. So I think that shows that this was a pretty good outcome from council, working hard with the state government and also, trying to keep that cost down as much as possible for the people of Wellington East.
Madam Chair.
Yes, councillor Coleman.
Thank you. It'll be handy later on, Madam Chair and members, that Bill here or the CEO or Joel will point out to us that now get rid of this asset further down the track once the dust is all settled financially, how much we'll probably save.
Actually, and the other part of that is that we would have had to upgrade our asset, which was still going to be a non-potable water supply.
Mm.
And so you would have ended up paying the same amount of money probably, but not getting drinking water. So it didn't make any sense to do that. And I'm glad that we were able to convince SA Water to come on board.
Do you have a question? Yes. No. Okay. Okay, done that. There are statutory, so this is a draft schedule of fees and charges. So there are some statutory fees that are set by the state government that we don't have any say on, and there are fees and charges that council set. So with the fees and charges that are set by council, nearly everything has stayed the same, with some minor increases to the waste transfer station, also called dump fees, and further clarification around households that need extra bins. So Joel, do you want to talk about the extra bins?
So we've got across our district, there are a number of additional bins that have been collected, and we will work with those that own them to give them an option. If they want to keep having them collected, we need to start appropriately charging for it. And this is just a bit of a legacy issue that we're trying to tidy up for this financial year. But essentially they've been offered the opportunity. They can either choose to, yes, I want to keep the bin and we'll continue to get charged for it, or they can return the bin and not have the extra bin. So that is just an item we're trying to tidy up into the new financial year.
Yeah, and I think it also sets a clear process around those who do want, and they'll know ahead of time what their fees are going to be. And so there's been some conjecture over, can I get a bin, or no, you can't, yes, you can. So we've sort of tried to iron that one out. We've talked a little bit about the community waste water management system. However, this slide is showing that the 26-20 fees will remain the same. 780 for an occupied site and 749 for vacant land. And these costs are based on a full cost recovery pricing for providing the swim systems. Anything more to add?
I think probably that they're fairly consistent with sewer charges for SA Water as well.
Yeah. Council uses a region-wide waste management provider. Within the boundaries of a town, there is a reduction in the annual service charge of about $25. The charged fully covers our waste collection costs. And for those of you who don't have a curbside collection, you are able to use bin banks. There is a different fee depending on how far you live away from the bin bank. And if you're over 5 kilometres from the bin bank area, there is no charge. And so if you're not aware, bin banks are used in areas where there isn't a standard curbside collection, and bins are brought to an identified area on a scheduled pickup date, emptied, then taken home again by their owners. Oops, go too fast. So council now manages just one remaining water scheme located at Peak. It is significantly smaller than the former Wellington East system, and the pricing shown here reflects the full cost recovery for providing that service. All properties pay the same annual service charge for access, which aligns with SA Water's approach for consistency. Any further?
Probably also some people ask, are we going to be able to do the same thing for Peak as we did for Wellington East? Probably unlikely at this stage, because Wellington East had SA Water at the end of Ferry Road, whereas Peak doesn't have anywhere near, SA Water anywhere near Peak. So at this stage, Peak will remain as it is.
But I think the charge per kilowatt is still less than SA Waters.
Well, what we've done here is we've tried to keep it as low as possible. However, you know, the economies of scale with a small population makes it a challenge, but we deliberately wanted to push hard to make sure it was under $400.
So public consultation around this plan is ongoing tonight. I think it's the last night. All submissions have to be in by this Friday, close of business, 5 p.m.
Mhm.
So there is still time, and you can download the full plan from the council's website. So next steps, like I said, submissions close on Friday. Tuesday, the 9th of June, we'll be holding a special council meeting to adopt the feedback we've received and to consider it. And then Tuesday, the 7th of July, we'll be having a meeting to adopt the business plan and budget. And then in mid-July, the rates notices for the first quarter will be generated. So you want to keep looking at this a bit further. There's a couple of documents there on the council's website that you can have a look at.
Might say every submission we'll respond to. So if you write into us, we'll write specifically to your questions and your feedback.
So in closing, thank you for taking an interest here in person. Thank you. And to those listening online, Council is operating in a very challenging economic environment. We have rising inflation, high interest rates, supply chain constraints and cost of living pressures, all impacting on both Council and the members of our community. And at the same time, Council has significant responsibilities when it comes to looking after the community's assets. Not only that, SCOSA requires Council demonstrate they are working towards adequately funding asset renewal and not deferring those costs on into the future. And the increase being proposed in rates ensures we maintain services and keep assets up to date and ensure intergenerational equity so that future ratepayers are not left with a large burden. So thank you very much for being here with us this evening. And if you have any further questions, happy to hear them. Councillor Coleman.
Well, I might as well keep something going since not many here, is there?
You've got all the questions, mate.
Do we know how many are viewing us online at all? Find that out? Just curious, that's all. It's just disappointing, no offence to our lovely 3 people there, but there could have been a few more people, but obviously maybe everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy. That's a good sign.
Yeah. Anyway, a question. When we had the curbside pickup charges, I noticed, which is good news, $23 reduction. Is that through the chair to our director, Roads and Infrastructure? Is that due to this new contractor and the amalgamation of all the councils? How did that come about?
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. So we have to forecast a predicted cost to deliver that service, and how we do that, and I'll get to the point about the contractor in a sec. How we do that is we basically take the first half of this financial year and the costs associated with delivering the service, basically what we get invoiced from the contractor.
Yep.
We extrapolate that out to 12 months. We add in a few bits and pieces in there around some of the admin time and some of the overhead costs that are associated with managing that contract. Things like, bin replacements are factored into it as well for damaged bins. And so what happens is that all spits out a number and we go, well, we think that's the target we're aiming for in terms of generating income.
Yep.
Divide that by the amount of bin collections there are, spits out a number per house. The contract that we've got has been in place for a period of time, for about 2 or 3 years. I would like to say that we're probably keeping a fairly close and stringent eye on it at the moment, just given the increasing cost on everything. So there's probably little bits and pieces that we're identifying here and there that are savings within that contract. The other thing, we've had the regional local government association, the Murraylands Riverland LGA have been, we've been paying them a levy and they've been managing
right.
the contract on behalf of all 7 or 8 councils that hold a contract with the supplier. They are no longer going to continue to do that. So it does create another job for us to do, but it is a saving. It is approximately $20,000 a year that we didn't have to fork out. So that reduces your projected cost and therefore the income you got to generate. So it's a best forecast is the way we describe it. Now it's like trying to predict what it's going to cost at the end of 26, 27 now. And things can change, volumes can fluctuate. There's a number of factors that are flexible for the next 12 months as we deliver that service. So we try and get it as close as we can, but we always anticipate there may be a little bit of an over or a little bit of an under either way, depending on how the year pans out. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, yes.
Question, it's a statement. I'd
Yep.
like to thank you all for taking your own time out, to put this meeting on to explain things to us here tonight. I just wish that there wasn't the amount of apathy out in the community that there is towards council where it's not warranted. Joel would have seen firsthand in this last week some of the thoughts of one of the residents of Wellington East when he got sort of corralled and bailed up out in the middle of the street about a few things, and I really don't think that it's fair that the residents need to take the time to look for themselves instead of trying to get everything handed to them on a plate.
Yeah.
I commend for what you have done here tonight to explain things to people. I just wish that more people would take the opportunity to come and listen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
And
that.
for what it's worth, there were very reasonable discussions with those residents. So it was okay. And I don't mind going out. I don't mind going out and talking to people. And
I
Yeah.
really appreciate what you just said.
yeah, thank you though.
Good.
And we had
Whatever
more
you do.
people like you.
Well, actually, yeah, do you want to run for council?
Yeah, like I had the same thought.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, for that.
No, you actually are not. Thank you.
Right.
Very good.